Welcome back to Newsfeed. I'm here with Josh Lank and Katie Kennedy, two University of Michigan students who participated in women's marches on Saturday, January 21st, the day after Trump's inauguration. Josh, Katie, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
So I just want to get started by asking about your motives for participating in the march. Josh, can you give us a little bit of a local perspective?
Yeah, so I live here. I'm a student, and it was something that was going on. I am pretty staunchly against what the administration has been doing and what they've been promising since last year. So it was something to kind of show solidarity, because it is a women's march and primarily was focused on like reproductive rights. At least around here, that was the general sense I was getting. I mean, there was some Black Lives Matter activists in there too, and we definitely talked. That was a dialogue that was brought up. But generally, it's reproductive rights, and as we've already seen, like within a couple days, he's already taking reproductive rights and are restricting funding from countries that have abortions. Not necessarily, you can't fund abortions using foreign money, but you can receive money, and countries that do perform abortions, they're already restricting that. So that was kind of what it was for, and as someone who would like to reproduce at some point but doesn't want to now, I'm kind of involved with the conversation. It's not necessarily my body, but it is something that's like important for me to be involved with, and important to kind of show solidarity with women across the world and across the country, that you're not alone in feeling this. It's not just one fight, it's everyone's got to get in there. So that was kind of why I was there, was just to help out, I guess.
Right. And Katie, you participated in the march in DC. Can you tell us a little bit about why you were there and what the atmosphere was like?
Yeah, of course. So I went for two reasons. I guess my intention was I went for the protests and as well as the march, and both had very different feels to start. But the march had a very, I guess I'll start with the criticism of the march. Before it even happened, people were worried about if it would be too whitewashed and it'd be more about like white feminism instead. But I guess that was one of the reasons I went, is definitely to be the other half of that. So my sister and I went to represent queer Black lives, and so we had a big sign that said queer Black Lives Matter, and we weren't the only ones. So that was really reassuring. And it was probably the same field too, a lot of reproductive rights, a lot of challenging Trump's rhetoric of grab them by the pussy. There was a lot of that, a lot of, man, we saw tons of things. We saw signs that said "Thank you, John Lewis." It was a beautiful day, and because it was so intersectional, and well, I don't want to say it was so intersectional, but because so many people and so many identities were there, it was a day of just joy. Like there's a reason why no one was arrested, and I could feel that as I was there, really. Yeah.
Did you feel the same way in Ann Arbor? Did you see a lot of different demographics, a lot of diversity and unification?
Yeah, I mean, there was just more than I would have thought. It was a little bit primarily white, I would say, but there definitely was, as far as like events in Ann Arbor, it was diverse as far as it goes, but it's generally a pretty white area to begin with. But yeah, I mean, you had people who were, I saw kids holding signs, and like that was really cool. There was one that was just like, "Stop being mean." I was like, yeah, that kid gets it. But and so anywhere from like toddlers and even little beebs, maybe a year old, but like all the way up to I had some people who had been fighting for the cause their whole lives. So there was definitely a really like a wide age range, and then like a lot of men, a lot of women, just people you wouldn't think would be there were there, and it was really, really cool just to see that happen.
Definitely. Was there a moment in the march in DC where you felt particularly inspired? And same for you in Ann Arbor. We'll start in DC.
Yeah, absolutely. I came across this older white man, and he was very old, and he was like cane and all, completely decked out in like Black Lives Matter, like completely down to t-shirt, hat, and like a flag. And so it was really inspiring. Like, and I saw a little boy with a sign that says, it was like keep your hands off my mom, and like and there was like an attachment that says, "Or I'll beat you up." And I came up to him and I was like, "Nice sign." He was like, "Thanks, my mom says I can put that there." And it was so sweet. Yeah, and it was so beautiful. Like I talked to a man who had his daughter on his shoulders, and he brought his daughter, and he said, I just felt that she needed to be here, that she absolutely needed to be here. And you know, it was just a day filled with like, it was beautiful, you know, it really was. And it was again, like it's a stark contrast between like all the hate that I'm sure everyone has been feeling, you know. Like it's definitely a privilege to be scared, like since Trump's been been in office, but people are scared, and so like at the end of the day, it was like just like a act of expression, you know, at the same time.
So does the love and inspiration that you received at the march, does that outweigh any of the hate that you've received?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and like even if like people say like if you know this march wasn't as intersectional as I hoped, and I mean it could always be more inclusive, you know what I mean? Like I didn't see a lot of trans rights and like trans women's like organs being represented, but that's okay, you know, and like it's not, but like we always can work and we always have to keep like I like to call it unlearning, you know, and like from like what we think we know, but it does outweigh the hate sometimes, at least in this instance. And again, it's a reminder that if this many people can come together for one cause, then like we can really do anything, you know.
Yeah. Did you have a response to some of Trump's executive orders that he's just recently had in his first few days of office?
Yikes! Wow. Yeah. One word so far is just yikes. It's a lot. So it started with defunding countries that like aid to countries that provide abortions, but you can't. Like I said, you can't. There's a Helm Amendment. You can't actually use that money for abortions. Then we have that, and like he's already put out a gag order with the EPA, and he had the Department of Agriculture, I think, saying that like you can't do it, but then that like changed, and so then they're like national parks had to stop tweeting and like had to stop putting out information, and that's really sketchy at best. At best sketchy, you know, pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, pros and cons to that. Building the wall is idiotic and just don't get why we're going there, but like it's gonna be really expensive, and like last year, or at least in 2010, there were more undocumented immigrants leaving the country to go back to be with their families actually than there were entering the country. So it's just kind of this whole like moot point, like why are we doing this? Why are we denying science? Why are we gutting like carbon emissions regulations? Like it just doesn't make sense. So I guess there hasn't been quite a response yet, but it's coming. I know there's like a scientist march in Washington, I think this weekend. I hope that makes its way here, and I know there are going to be demonstrations for Planned Parenthood coming up, and I'll be there too. But I think he's issued some like 10 executive orders, and it's been like a week, and the record is 239, and that was FDR, and so he's on pace to beat that one like handily. I think that's when you kind of reach a point where you might like need to hold off. But I mean. Wow, yeah, it's a lot.
So as far as effectiveness, do you think that the march, did it achieve its goal?
Yeah, I think so. I think
or what was its goal, do you think?
Yeah.
Because I think there was a lot of different messages that were going around. There wasn't one specific singular message, which is part of why it was one of the biggest marches in history, or arguably the biggest march in history. So can you comment a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that, one of the reasons why it was right after the inauguration, literally the day after, was to agitate and be loud. At the end of the day, it was to cause attention. It was to make him address it, which he had to do. You know what I mean? And it's more so of like this is what as Americans we feel. You know what I mean? And I love how it was literally all over the world. Even in Antarctica, a group of female researchers out in the snow did like love from every continent. Like I think at the end of the day it's a way to be loud, and I think that if you categorize that as a way of like we're here and we're not going anywhere and this is just the beginning, then absolutely it did its job. And again, like I think it is the biggest march on history in a single time. It's not in just one place. But like the fact that like accessibility is an issue, going to a march on Washington. I was lucky enough to go, So the fact that we have it in Ann Arbor, Detroit, literally everywhere, I think that speaks volumes too. So I think, yes, in my opinion, it was absolutely successful.
And so definitely going forward, what do you think would be your message to people who are feeling afraid, are feeling scared?
We just need to keep fighting, I guess. It's not gonna go away if we just say, like, this is bad. If we keep tweeting, it's not gonna go away. He's already shut down the White House line. That's really sketchy too. You know, he's just like, post something on Facebook, and it's like, well, you're not gonna hear about that. So you call your congressman, make sure you do that. I know.
Yeah, definitely do that.
There's something like that. Paul Ryan's line's been down for a couple days now. And that's, you know, you just
also
gotta
show up. You can definitely show up and make an appointment and just clog that airway too.
You just keep going. So I mean, definitely remain just very, very, very informed, very focused. Because the second you lose what's what's actually happening, that's when you start buying into whatever propaganda they're gonna start pushing out.
How important do you feel is speaking to the other side, having these conversations openly and honestly?
I mean,
how difficult is it as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, it's always been difficult. I mean, these issues have persisted long and hard. Now, I mean, I guess in the last couple of days, it's definitely dropped a couple tiers. But these issues have been here, and it's always been hard to talk about them. You know, so now I think that we need to be on an understanding where. And it's hard to approach an issue, especially when you don't want to offend. So like I work with kids too, and so a lot of them are really like embarrassed or scared or ashamed to talk about it or ask about it because they think it's rude. Or my little kids just go, I think it's racist, but why does your hair, like what is your hair? You know what I mean? Like just by asking. Exactly. So like I feel like people have these questions and like that can be answered, and when we leave those situations without any discourse, that's when the stigma piles on, and that's when it gets worse and worse, and that's when like it's just like an elephant, you know. So like I think that's something I challenge everyone. I challenge myself every day to approach the conversation with, let's take this mask off, like human to human. Like, what do you want to talk about, you know? And like when I talk about race and dialogue, it takes me like 15 minutes to kind of like be like, okay, guys, but like really, like let's talk, like, you know, like. But really, you can ask me something, you know what I mean? And sometimes it really works, and a lot of these issues can be like talked through. I mean, not all of them, but like either like what you're thinking or why. If a question is like, well, you know, I don't see, I guess the march here, a lot of people asked me like, why did the protesters during the March for Justice like separate themselves and segregate themselves? And after talking about it with them, like we come to this conclusion, like, well, there's roles to play, especially like with allyship, and they actually they put themselves out there and shield like their allies from the police because they're less likely to get harmed. You know what I mean? And also there's just different ways to do activism, and like it's I don't know. There's a lot can be discourse, I guess. So we need to be all open to that.
Well, thank you, Katie and Josh, for being here. We really appreciate your perspective here at Newsfeed at this pivotal moment in history. Now back to you in the studio.